You talk about that in the book too. 99.5% is identical, right?
You and I, 99.5% identical, even though you're a lot bigger than me. We're at 99.5% identical. And even though I'm black and you're white, we're still 99.5% identical. And more importantly, we're made in the image of God, the same God. And that's 100% identical. So we have more in common than we have difference, but the cloud of racism pushes us away from each other. And it creates fear and anger and bitterness towards people, and then we can't see our what we have in common. We focus on our differences.
Yes.
If we can honor, which means put a priceless value on what we have in common, and focus on what we have in common. When we were on a football team, people came from all over the country. They had nothing culturally in common.
Yes.
Some people, but once we put the uniform on,
Same with my life.
Oh.
Yeah.
we're on the same team.
That's
We got
right.
one goal, one enemy. The enemy is not the skin; it's this jersey color,
That's right.
and they are your enemy. And we have one goal. It wasn't like, hey, if he's black, I'm not going to throw the football to him. That never. It wasn't that about that. And if we can, as a culture, focus on the things we all want, and the things that we all are, how we all are similar.
Yeah.
That's the third option. And so I wrote the book to give people tools, to equip people, to help them understand how is it that I maybe don't honor you? How is it that I'm looking at our differences and not what we have in common? And how can I begin to express honor towards you?
Define racism for us, because you look in the dictionary and racism talks about, prejudging someone, prejudice.
Right.
That's what prejudging is,
Right.
right? But usually it's tied to trying to create superiority in types of someone.
Right.
And I liked it. You talked about that in your book. I'm paraphrasing it, but it really touched me. You said it's really, we begin when we no longer honor ourselves, we no longer love ourselves, and we no longer love others, when we forget what the plan is of what life's really about. That's when we start to destroy ourselves. It's like racist to ourselves. How do you define racism, and is it possible for someone to offend someone without meaning to and not be a racist? Because in today's world, that doesn't seem to be so. And if someone did do that, can they be healed? What would be your definition of racism, and what's the move towards solution? I'd love if you talk a little bit about how we group ourselves,
Right.
the in-group and the out-group. I think that was
Right.
really useful in your book.
Yeah, first I would say, and when people ever come to this subject, a lot of times they push back because they feel like if I admit to being racially offensive,
Yes.
I am also admitting to being a racist.
Yes.
And so up front, we need to establish that you can be a racially offensive and not be a racist. I'm gonna say that another time because it's very important. I can offend someone racially and not mean it.
Yeah.
Not even know I did it. It doesn't make me a racist. Now, you may say it does, but it doesn't make me a racist.
Yes.
Now, of course, there are people who are racist.
Of course,
But-
where their intent is to try to harm somebody, or
Correct.
destroy them, or lower their status, or whatever.
Their intent is to put them down, to establish that they are superior
Right.
simply because of their real ethnicity. There's only one race, the human race. But
Yeah.
so racism purely is I am better than you because of my ethnicity.
Yes.
Now, there's three kinds. There's institutional racism, systems.
Yeah.
Then there's personally mediated, where it's just me and you. I despise you, I resent you.
And then there's doing it to yourself too.
Internalized
right?
racism,
Yeah,
right? Where I've been told over my life that I'm inferior, and culture tells me I'm inferior.
And I believe
Culture,
it.
and I believe it.
Yeah.
But people first have to accept that they can be racially offensive and not be a racist if they're not.
Yes.
But they have to accept that they can be racially offensive before they can learn. Because in the thousands of conversations I've had, when people they can't separate those two things.
Yes.
They will not accept that they're offensive, because if they do, they're accepting they're a racist.
Yeah.
And therefore, they will never accept that anything they say is offensive. Therefore, the conversation never happens. That is a big frustration with people of color who are trying to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But if people can say, okay, maybe there's something I can learn. Maybe I have a blind spot.
Yes.
We talk about blind
Yes,
spots in the
exactly.
book as well, chapters 5 and 6. That there's things I don't know about how I view myself and how I view others. Because we were made in the image of God, I was created to love you.
Yes.
I was created to see God in you.
you, right.
And when I don't see God in you, when I lower you
Yes.
and dehumanize you, I am living below my God-given design.
Yes.
So that's really on me.
So social scientists has helped us understand this. What is it about the human mind? I don't think it's the human spirit, but the mind that makes us want to be with people we think are like us? And how does that affect the way we look at things that might be creating a blind spot that we don't notice?
Exactly. Sociologists call it grouping. So we're all in groups. Men are a group. Pastors are a group.
Yeah.
Assistant pastors are a group.
Athletes.
Athletes are a group. Good athletes, bad athletes.
Couple
Players are a
categories.
group. And even your position. So, and when you identify a group, these are people who you have a lot in common with, and you
Yes.
acknowledge what you have in common. So you feel more comfortable with them. You're more patient with them. You're more gracious. You have more positive assumptions about people in your group.
Yes.
But the opposite is true about the people not in your group. You have less positive assumptions. You're less patient. You're less gracious.
Yes.
And if the group happens to be ethnicity, and you are less gracious towards people who are not your ethnic group,
Yes.
that comes off as racism.
Yes.
However, if we could all step back and acknowledge the groups that we're in that have nothing to do with race, and how we give favoritism to the groups we're in,
Yes.
and just apply that to race, apply it to gender.
Give us
And
an example.
Give,
Give me an example of that.
Oh,
Like,
I walk into a room and there's a bunch of pastors in the room, and we're a mega church, right? So we're a big church. So there's a group of pastors that are big churches, and there's a group of pastors who have small churches. Well, the group of pastors that have big churches have more in common with me. So I may walk over to them, and the group of pastors of the small churches may feel snubbed.
okay.
Those guys
And
think
that's
that-
not the intent.
It's not the
It's just
intent.
you relate to them because you're solving some of the same problems, trying to serve such a large
Exactly.
audience of people in a short period of time. And
Exactly. You may talk to a pastor and he has no one on staff.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have an HR director because he has no one to HR.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I get it.
But you go to a senior pastor or a lot of times I'll talk to people in business, and when I tell them we have 200 staff, they all of a sudden go, "Oh, I understand the burdens you have
Yeah.
if you have 200 staff,"
Yeah.
right? Because they have 200 staff. And,
Yes.
and so now
But the way it'd be perceived by some people, it's kind of like, if I rub your arm like this, no problem. But if you've got a bunch of sores there, I could touch you with a cat hair and you're going to react. And it's not just you, it's a set of life experiences.
Exactly.
So you have no bad intent.
Correct.
But in this case, it's not called racist. It'd just be called, you're an arrogant son of a...
exactly.
And you weren't being arrogant. You were just trying to relate in some way.
Right, and by the way, it could have been arrogance, but maybe not. Maybe it's just, hey, that's
Sometimes it is, just like
maybe I
sometimes it
wanted-
is racism.
Yeah, maybe I wanted to go learn from some of
Yeah.
the senior pastors,
Yeah.
right? So we do that all the time. We gravitate to people we're more comfortable with, the people we're around, but the people who aren't in that group, who may want to be in that group,
Yeah.
they want to learn from that group.
Yes.
They might feel they were snubbed. Sometimes, listen, I know that sometimes I thought people were mean towards me because of race. It may not have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
It may have been they had a bad day.
Yeah.
And so, but that creates a blind spot, which is me being unaware of something I'm blind to.
Yes.
I don't even know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to find out your blind spots is to ask. And so if you add a friend who's black, Hispanic, white, or whatever, and say, is there anything I do or say that is racially